Well, now we're going to talk about Anne Waldman's rogue state. Now, really, Anne Waldman should appear in the next chapter of this course because she's thought of mostly as a second-generation New York school poet. But she had a very, very close relationship with Allen Ginsberg. They became friends and collaborators. And at a certain point, Allen Ginsberg turned toward chanting Blakean and Wordsworthian ballads. And in a way, this is what rogue state does. So in that mode, Ginsberg was not performing the long lines. He was actually doing ballads. And this, as I say, influenced Waldman. So she sought a kind of bardic, performative role as what she called an outrider. And this is a good instance of that. So what's a rogue state? There are two definitions probably happening here. What's the political definition that we know, Dave?
A state that's stopped following the rules.
Okay, but it's actually a phrase that gets used in politics. What does it refer to?
A rogue state that they stopped following. I don't understand.
Well, give me an instance of a rogue state.
Like one of the Soviet republics, the former Soviet republics, breaking off and not following.
Okay, what about, a rogue state would be something like North Korea or Libya. That would be a rogue state. Maybe Iran. Okay, so a rogue state is a pariah state. Okay, what else does rogue state refer to?
Be in a physical state of being.
Or
being
emotional state.
Sure, of being kind of rogue, as in like going a little crazy, going out there like a rogue agent. Could be like a CIA agent who's suddenly decided like.
So she's in a rogue state.
Of being.
Of being. Okay, good. And how does that manifest itself in the poem that Anne Waldman is in a rogue state? What is she doing? What does she want? Amaris?
Well, her voice is sort of like a phantom, sort of harpy-esque. It seems sort of inhuman at times.
What's a harridan? She calls herself a harridan.
Is it a woman who scolds excessively?
Yes, a bossy, strident, belligerent woman. This is quite an interesting position to sort of embrace, right? And what is she doing with that personality? Max?
It's a very political poem.
Yes.
She's railing against, all the sort of villains of the Bush era, including John Ashcroft.
And
not
not
just
John Ashcroft?
He was
lest we forget,
Attorney General for George W. Bush, and he famously covered up the statues on the Justice Department, right? The semi-nude statues. So he's a very prudish, kind of censoring guy.
And what would Anne Waldman have to say to him?
Well, she would tell him that she's in a rogue state.
She also describes herself as the Lady of Misrule. So does anybody want to describe who the Lord of Misrule was or is? Who wants to take a crack at that? Allie, go ahead. You can do it.
I think in French, is it French tradition?
I think in English as well.
All right. The kind of arbiter of the day of misrule. I mean, I guess the
when
Lord of
things,
misrule,
when a commoner gets chosen and everything gets turned upside down.
So when the kind of normal set of rules are no longer operative, that person is the presiding judge, perhaps.
So I'm in a rogue state, Bushy. She's referring to George W. Bush. Don't tell me what to do. Your rules aren't my rules, because I'm the Lady of Misrule. How does she sing that, by the way? She chants this. Molly, do you remember?
It's very sort of throaty and sort of quavering,
Warble.
very primal.
It's bluesy. It follows some sort of bluesy, like pentatonic melody, kind of going up and down.
And she talks about how she's going to enter gated communities. What kind of, how can you generalize about this? And
She just kind of seems like, especially, listening to her, and then if you watch the video of another one of her performances, she kind of just seems like this ghoul woman, like, who's just kind of rogue state all over you.
But is it even though you were smiling when you said that, you're describing it as if it's deadly serious. It's not, is it?
But it's not at all,
No,
and I
not
don't
at
think
all.
she treats it as if it's as if she's kind of making fun of her own rogue stating. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah. Max?
I think there's certainly a kind of an interesting, maybe even problematic racial element to this. To say, I mean, when we think of gated communities, I mean, we can't help but think of this sort of like exclusive, typically white neighborhoods that are gated in order to keep out the rest of the urban population. So typically African Americans or other ethnic minorities. And even this sort of like bluesy, warbling, almost like Nina Simone way of singing it, she's assuming this or appropriating this sort of black femininity and it's sort of threatening.
Maybe so. She
people
describes
with.
her role generally as an outrider, right, in the poetry world. Although she's been closely affiliated through the friendship with Ginsberg of the Beat generation and in the New York School, she thinks of herself as an outrider. So this is a role of the poet that we need to talk about for a few minutes. What's the role of the poet here? All right, what kind of poet is
Truth to power.
Speaking truth to power, yes. Keep going.
It's quite different than Wilbur's role of the poet.
Oh, yeah. What's the difference between Wilbur's role? He actually has a role. He calls it my office in that poem. My office is to
be the nice, genteel poet who's going to write about nice things. And
well, to make it possible
toads
for a lady, a different kind of lady of misrule in the making to lead a somewhat cheerful life. Okay, so the role of the poet per Anne Waldman?
not that.
Not that.
I think
Say
it's
more.
maybe to kind of come and like ruffle things up, and kind of create a type of chaos, or misrule in the face of how things are.
And for this poem, we don't have a text. We're not making a text available. This is only known for our purposes instructionally through the performance. That's new.
Well,
That's
that
new.
I think
I mean,
contributes.
even Kerouac, Babel Flow, I read it. We don't have a recording of Jack. He wrote that. Here we have a performance of a Blakean ballad in the Ginsbergian way with a female poet with antic energy, bardic, spiritual. So, say more.
Well, I was going to kind of talk about her use of rhyme there. I mean, when we talked about, the communist poets using the ballad form
Right.
as kind of maybe a way for remembrance or a way to kind of talk about something difficult in a form that's familiar. I think she's using the form here, one, because it's performance. And, it's, maybe that makes it easier for her to remember if you have certain things rhymed. It's pretty, I was just kind of like, as I was listening, I sort of felt like it was kind of A, B, C, B rhyme, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And the other kind of interesting thing about that is that she's talking about how she's in a rogue state and she's the lady of misrule, and yet it's in a fairly traditional form. I think that's very interesting.
Well, except that in this case, she's borrowing from Ginsberg the notion that one can perform the role of the poet and using Blake as a model, which is another guy of misrule, try to explode that through performance. But let's talk about performativity here. All right. So what's important and powerful about the poet performing? This too, gotten not just from Ginsberg, but from the mode of the Beat generation, moving out of publish your poem in a magazine, then publish it in a book, then hope that the prizes come in, and then this was the Beats were the more or less the beginning of the idea that you performed your poetry in order to try it out on your colleagues. This is certainly how Howell was presented to the poetry world. So let's talk about performance and the importance of it. Dave?
Just like form can communicate something of substance, so can the performance. And this performance I found difficult to listen to. And I think that was the point, because it's a protest poem and she's saying things that the people in power should find difficult to listen to as well.
Mm-hmm. Emily?
I think Dave said it pretty well. And I guess something that Ali said about it sitting ghoulish is the whole thing. It struck me as a taunt. And I think in the video you see that she sort of like waves her fingers in this spooky way. It may not be serious in its like semantic meaning, but it is a serious provocation.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me in line with in how when Ginsberg is talking about, you know, the Beats weeping and crying and doing sorts of shocking things and handing out nonsensical literature, sort of these Dada acts. Like this is a poem that's sort of shocking in its performance, but it can be performed anywhere. You can go down to Union Square and you can pick up right where the Beats left off and just start sort of warbling this and singing this.
It's an intervention, I guess is a word I would say. And what it winds up doing is create a kind of basic analogy that the Beats were very good at, which is how I feel personally can be analogized to the state of the polity. So Ginsberg in a poem we're not looking at America, talks about how he is America. And so whatever's going on in him needs to be applied to the society as a whole. And so she says, I'm in a rogue state. I'm basically North Korea. So boy, am I annoying, right?
She's not Sarah Palin.
No, it's a different sense of going rogue. She's really going rogue here. So she's likening, and this is a feminist poem in this sense, that she's likening the role of the harridan, the spiritual, bardic, performance artist, collaborator, teacher, activist, harridan, the witch, who's out there like a rogue state, but within, it's like the domestic version of the rogue state. And so she's being very radical, not by just delivering certain radical slogans or ideas about national and international politics, but she's saying, I am here bodily to represent the thing that will put all of this into check. So if the question is, what can you do to stave off the darkness, right? For Creeley in that terrific poem, it's about talking. For Anne Waldman, it's about singing provocatively and performing and kind of being in your face.